right, welcome everybody to Language of Ramses. I almost said Horus and Says, but no, that's next week. And so today, since we've covered quite a bit of ground in the recent sessions with the verb, we had, let me see, the first present, we had the simple past or the past tense, we had the perspective. No, at least officially we didn't have it yet, but we used it 100 times already. We have used the imperative. We have used or we have discussed the third future, the aorist, especially the negative aorist. We had a little thing there about a form that's like the not yet form. So lots of different verb forms, and they also come with different pronouns. So long story short, I thought before we continue, let's take a moment to recap a little bit and see going from English to Egyptian, how would you use these? How do you actually make sentences with them? Because from my experience, if you know how it works when you make your own sentences, it's much easier to see in the text what it could or could not be. That's just like with any language. The patterns are familiar to you, the easier you'll recognize them when you read them. Hey, Ben. Good afternoon. So I was thinking what we do today is just basically go through some examples of each, really like from basics, and see how to put some sentences together in Egyptian. And let's just see how that goes. I don't really have any glorious amounts of text prepared or something. I just thought we'd just go right into medias res and try a few out. How does that sound?
That sounds good.
All right. Awesome. Well, then let's start with like the simplest things like a first present, for example. How would you say, I give him bread? I'm just making it up as an example. And hang on, let me switch to Egyptian here. Or maybe we do this in transliteration first, and then I'll write out the whole version. So how would you say, for example, I give? And I have no idea why I'm Chinese today. Interesting. No, Japanese. Okay, all right. Oh, because there's a Japanese punctuation mark. That's why. Okay, fine.
So is give deep something like
Right?
deep?
D. That's right. Oops. D.
Yeah.
And now, so to give, that's right. Do you remember what bread is?
Uik.
Oik in Coptic, and it's aku in the earlier version of the language. That's right. So
Or
now,
ta.
go again.
No, I say or ta.
Yeah.
Sometimes they say
It's
ta.
not it's not
Correct.
tea anymore. It's not
Um,
tea anymore in late Egyptian then.
it can be, but I mean, I think I've seen this more commonly when you're not in like a religious context or something. If you're just talking
Mhm.
about that kind of bread that you'd be getting as part of your rations or
Ah,
um,
okay.
mhm. I wonder if tar is still used as an everyday word. I honestly don't know. Um, I wouldn't be surprised on like a monumental inscription or something. But let's go with oik for the moment or aku. How do you make it into I give?
It'd be
Um,
T.
You put two
Yeah.
two e on the front.
That's right, like this. And in the earlier version, it would be a
Uh,
her here. Um, but honestly, most of the time in late Egyptian proper, no, I shouldn't say that. In the 19th dynasty, it's still often there, and then it pretty much goes away. So the her you'll sometimes see, you sometimes won't see. I'll just leave it out. So okay. So right now we have tui di aku. I give bread. How do I get a to him or him bread in there?
do you
Ni.
go a ma?
Uh,
No.
and nasal is good. I'll go with the N. And how do we
Ni.
make it a him?
Nuf,
No.
nef.
You got it. That's right. So that would be I give him bread, right? Tui di naf aku. Almost, almost like in Coptic.
Quick
Um,
question. Quick question. Why do you say naf rather than nef?
because Coptic is at the back of my mind. That's the only reason why. Egyptologically, it should be Nef. Should be Nef. You're absolutely right. It's just in Coptic, it's Naf, right? So
I thought it was nef.
in
Oh,
Coptic,
I see. To him, Knife. Yes, you're right.
Naf. It's just because I have Coptic in my head. So I think D, Naf, Oik instead of RD, Nef, Aku. But yeah, Egyptologically speaking, it should be Nef. Yes,
Quick question.
of course.
The urdi, is that the actual, as it were, infinitive urdi, or is the ra like do giving?
It is indeed an infinitive. And it's good that you're calling that out because technically there should be a T here. Why? Because D is a weak verb, so it should get a T ending in the infinitive. So actually, really glad that you said that because I completely forgot about it. So,
A weak verb meaning it ends with a weak consonant like a semivowel.
correct. With a basically it ends in a J. I don't. Hmm,
I
are
think
there? Mhm.
I think I happened to read chapter one again, which is sort of where I am. And it said that if you've got a thing with only three, then you put a t on.
Let's have a quick look.
Either
In
chapter one
it,
or chapter two of Neveu.
let's take a look what he says. Because it's not completely. So in Middle Egyptian, it's pretty simple. If the verb ends in a J, then if the last consonant is a J, then it gets a T in the infinitive. In late Egyptian, is sometimes you add that T even where it, quote unquote it doesn't belong. Let me find my Neveu here.
Whilst you're looking for it, my real question actually was this is the actual verb urdi, or is it to do, to give? So is the actual verb di, or is it urdi?
Oof, that's a really good question, honestly. And maybe somebody has a better opinion on that than I do, because does
If
anybody
I could,
know?
if I could chip in from Middle Egyptian, it's both, depending on
Hmm.
the verb form.
That's right. I mean, originally it has you see verb forms that are spelled with an extra R, clearly spelled with an R, and you see others that are just spelled with a D, right? In Middle Egyptian. And I've never really figured out in which verb forms the R is there and is not there in Middle Egyptian. If anybody could comment on that, that would be very welcome. Because it's still a bit of a mystery to me.
Well, when it's just alone, it's usually in those inscriptions where it's in order to give, so that he may give.
If I'm understanding you correctly, Rebecca, do you mean does that R come from the verb iri, to do?
Yes.
And
Oh,
it's
no.
being
No.
that's
Okay.
what you're asking.
No,
Okay.
that's
Sorry.
no, that's fine.
Me,
Go ahead, sorry.
that's me being irrelevant.
Not really. So the R in RD does not come from iri. It's part of the verb itself. But you're putting your finger there on a very good point. In some verb forms, D to give has this extra R, and I couldn't tell you exactly which verb forms it has it and which ones it doesn't have it in, and if it's even still a thing in Late Egyptian. Um, I'm a little
I
bit.
think that Alan mentions
Yeah.
it as being an irregular verb because it's used in sort of in terms of its use so often that it has that irregular form in Middle
Hmm.
Egyptian. But
Yeah.
I should check that. So
There is a table in the book by Alan on Middle Egyptian, which shows different verb forms and which ones are RD and which ones are D. I've got the book, but I can't find the page with the table on it that I'm thinking of.
The first of these two is spelled with these two signs. Well, typically for us in papyri and late Egyptian, it's the second one. But in hieroglyphs, you could see either. Um, the first of these signs originally had the value G with a J. But by Middle Egyptian, it had become D, says Alan. Okay. The second, which is really just a combination of that little bread loaf here on top of an arm, has the value D, often just written like a hand. Okay. The verb RD has two base stems and an irregular geminated stem. RD, D, and dead. All right. The two base stems seem to have been variants rather than alternants. That is, two forms with the same meaning rather than different meanings. Maybe that's why I can't figure it out. Which is used where? Yes, Chris.
Yeah, I found the table,
Oh, great. Where is it?
and it shows a lot of different tenses of verbs. And it has, for example, perfective is RD, but imperfective is D, subjunctive is D, prospective is RD. There's no logic in it. It's
Mm.
just no
It-
logic that I can see. And the passive is RD. So it's mostly RD, but a couple of forms use D.
Is that the second edition or the third edition?
I'll try. I'll look at the front. Where does it say that? James P. Allen. Must be, I mean, it might be it doesn't seem to have an edition on it. So
Oh,
maybe it's the first edition.
oh wow.
If you have it there, it's on page 295.
Let's have a look.
Would any of you happen to have a copy of the grammar by Leo DePut? Yeah, to me, I think he does a better job explaining that. It's on page 444 in his grammar.
Okay, hang on. I'll take a look. Oh, can you share it in any way, shape, or form?
No, I have the hard copy.
Oops,
So-
that's funny. I thought I had it. I don't have it. Chris, can you like summarize it maybe? Like what the key points are?
Let's see here. So he says, "Oh well. I mean, I know you all are doing Alan first. So let me see. Do I have a copy of?
I'll look
I
for
mean-
19 in the meantime. Yeah.
Diagnosis IFR. I mean, the gist of it really is kind of like we don't know, to be honest with you.
This seems to be it.
I mean, he talks about irregularity and absence of presence of R. Then he talks about sufficiency diagnostic purposes for R, and then overlapping in writing. He mentions that the error is mainly used in the stative form. It appears to be used mostly in the stative form. Without the error tends to be this is passive. But yeah, but he doesn't give a concrete reason as to like why it happens. Like for example, a given verb form. Yeah, he doesn't really say. Let me see here.
No, nothing that I've seen in Allen gives any logic for it.
Mm.
Just in a couple of forms, it doesn't have the er.
Yeah, he pretty much just calls it an irregular verb and
Yeah.
says it just has multiple forms. You just kind of go with it.
Yeah. So the last sentence here, he says the absence or presence of air again contributes nothing toward identifying the verb form. In this case, this is just as well because neither absence nor presence even seems to be regular.
Interesting. I sort of had the feeling that's what it was, but I hadn't read it that clearly. So that's actually pretty cool. So in other words, don't pay any attention to it. Sometimes there's an R and sometimes there isn't. Okay.
There's a similarity in the verb for come because you get EU and E.
Right.
And again, the two both seem to occur.
Although that one, there is at least one regularity. For the perspective, it's always the one with the W, not E, but EU, the one that has the walking legs is used for the perspective. That's the one rule that actually exists for that
Okay.
verb. But yeah, it also has two stems, E and EU,
Yeah.
or EUE, however you want to transcribe that.
Yeah.
Okay, wow, that was a big bunny ride. Apologies, but so we still haven't solved yet which infinitives get a T and which ones don't get a T, right?
Yeah.
And Millie Egyptian, I thought the third week verbs
That's
get the
right.
T at the end. Yeah.
And that's still the case here. Here we go. Infinitives of verbs that were feminine, in other words, got the T in Middle Egyptian, namely the ones that had a third week, tertiae infirme. Causatives of two literals, and those special verbs, LD to give, EU, E, and INI to bring. They generally still have the T. So to Rebecca's question, it should be deet in this case. It should have a T at the end. And then what I was talking about, sometimes the T is added without any reason to infinitives of verbs that were masculine in the classical stage of the language. So you'll just sometimes see a random T thrown in. I think probably because there was a final vowel, would be my guess.
That seems to be a characteristic of late Egyptian, that whereas Middle Egyptian had some definite grammar rules, when they got to late Egyptian, they seem to have said to themselves, there's often a T on the end.
Right.
Let's put it always there to make sure we don't be wrong and leave it out.
I think it's hypercorrection. I think what happens is that in a lot of words, all words that had a final T, they end in a final vowel now, just like in French. Everything that had a final T or final R or something will now end in some kind of vowel. And as a result, they sort of associate the spelling with the final T with final vowel. And so if the word ends in a vowel, oh, might, to your point, might as well write a T because it's probably correct. So let's write this thing in Egyptian here. Oops. 2E. So I'll leave the R out. I'll just make it D. D, and then the infinitive ending underneath. So upon giving him, oops, him, bread, I said, right? So who, maybe this here should have gone to the upper right corner. Let's see, what is that? Option 4? Nope. Control 4? Neither. Shift 4? But not Shift 4. But Shift 3? Yes. Okay. Cool. And then let's make it clear that this is spread somehow. Something like this. There's a weird thing going on with this font that if you have a line just by itself, it cuts off the top. I guess you guys can see that. Like the N isn't really visible and the Q here. Somehow Japanese punctuation cures that. I don't know why, but it works. So I'll just continue doing it. But in case you're wondering, so my little punctuation marks actually help. So this would be I give him bread. As simple as that. Okay, let's change this a little bit. If we wanted to make it I give you bread. How does the sentence have to change?
You'd change the F to an ek,
Okay,
I think.
for the male version, that's right.
Oh, well,
And
yes, for masculine and singular, and for feminine, it would be T,
that's right.
net or netch.
I
Originally, it
think
was netch, but now it's net, right?
actually I wonder how they now spell that. Let's have a quick look because I mean the T is definitely dead by now. So the only question is, do you still write that or not? Suffix pronoun. It could maybe just be like a B2 woman as well. Just because honestly, I was thinking I would expect this rather. Because you're right, it used to be niche, but now at this point in time, that T is
But you could
definitely
also
silent.
have a regular T also.
Or that. Good
But
point. Really good point. You're right. It could also be a regular T. That's one of those that's easily tripping you up because you think like there must be something else, like a genitive particle or something. But yeah, you're right. It could just be net with a regular T. Great call out. So this would be I give you spoken to a woman some bread. All right. Really nice. Let's go through the suffix pronouns real quick. How do they go? To me,
Any?
ni. That's right.
Me.
Then we just had mm, neck and ne. Oopsie. I should probably spell this out, but in reality, it's really net or ne. To him,
Nef.
that's right. And to her,
Ness,
that's right. Just like in Coptic. To us,
nen,
that's right. None. Again, like in Coptic. To you, plural.
Netin. Sorry.
No, that's good. Netin. And finally, to them.
And send.
Netu.
Netset?
Netu.
Oh, two. That's right.
Ah, is it?
New.
I,
Or set.
I would have said no.
Yes.
New. Okay.
Yeah.
The older one is Nissan.
That's right. Okay.
But I think it's no because I mean this u is the new suffix pronoun in late Egyptian. It's more and more common. Okay, awesome. So these are all just the regular suffix pronouns. One suffix pronoun I didn't mention yet, and I don't think it occurs with the preposition n, but if this were like, for example, to conjugate a verb like sech me, sech mek, sech met, and so on, you also have that to form, right? To one. But yeah, this does not occur with prepositions. So we'll get there in a moment. Just a quick reminder, this also exists. How would you say to the man, by the way?
Then it goes on the end.
So there's an N and then afterwards?
No, I mean
Lisa?
it goes further down the line, doesn't it?
I missed it. Go again.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just thinking if you're saying to the man.
Mhm.
Oh, okay. And
Lisa?
I suppose ends. What's the?
Okay, answer. Although honestly, they don't really use much anymore. They use it very often when you say like the two of them. You would have this now, basically meaning the two men. But normally, when you talk about a man, it is a different word.
Nepa Rumich.
Remet?
That's right.
Mimich.
That's right.
Remet.
Mhm.
Using the Coptic pronunciation there. Kind of
Right.
nice.
So Enparemic or Enebramic, however you want to style that. Yeah, that's what would be to a man. To a woman?
To the, not the the. To
Um,
the.
oh, right. To the woman. You're right. Not to a woman. You're correct. So how would you say to the woman?
Mm,
You can say it the
ta.
same way, can't you?
No. Nta. And then woman. Human.
Hey, yeah. Himit is good.
Yemen?
Could be Himit or probably more likely Set Himit, which becomes Eschime in Coptic.
Oh,
Um,
cool. Wondering where that came from.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's
but could
this.
you write remet with a woman determinative? Remet? Ta remet?
Oh, that's a really good question.
I don't think so. I think another they use another word.
No, but I've seen women written that way though.
Oh.
I
Yeah,
think
I've seen women written it.
I
That's
think I've seen
interesting.
that once. Just
Right,
like
it's
you.
rare, right?
It's rare. I
That's
mean,
kind of like how when they refer to Athena sometimes in Greek, they say hey theos, where it's the feminine definite article, but then the masculine form
oh,
of a
cool.
god instead of hey thea.
I did
It'd
not know that. Mhm.
it'd be interesting to look up woman in your Ramesses online. Like I don't know, une femme.
Yeah.
The reason they do that for Greek has a particular cultural connotation that maybe those instances of that word being of Remech being feminine might have some sort of gendered importance by marking it that way.
I don't
So
think
for
Greek is not a comparator, I don't think, as I've said before.
oh no, I wasn't comparing the languages together. I was comparing the type of cultural concept between language and changing the genders
Like
of
why would you do
using
that
it.
basically, right?
Yeah,
Mhm.
using an unexpected definite or a gender definite article. It's wasn't the languages are not related at all.
Right. Christopher's right. Rumt.
It seems to exist. Let's see if we can find a sentence for that in a moment. But before we go there, so here are the ones that I know. Of course, Khimit, also like in Middle Egyptian, mainly wife, right? Like the royal wife and so on. Then you have Set, which is just a feminine version of Se that we had a moment ago. The standard Middle Egyptian word for man. Give it a feminine article, and it becomes the word for woman. not article, sorry, ending, what am I saying? A feminine T. And then you combine the two into Sedhimit, which then becomes the Coptic word for woman, scheme. And this one is what I would have expected for Late Egyptian, but look at that. There's this thing too. So Remechet. Let's take a look how that's used. Oh, there's a sentence and exactly no. Oh, there's a whole bunch of them.
You have an extra T sound at the end or ch on the end to mark that it's feminine.
So it
Yes.
seems, although in this
Female
case,
version of the man. So maybe that, Christopher, maybe that comes from an earlier form where they just feminize the normal word for person, stroke
it seems
man.
right.
That makes
A sheep person, yeah. Or interesting.
Yeah,
Titan.
because there's some words that are man and that are like specifically husband and wife, and there are other words that are like people or person, and so the gender of those words could be marked for either.
This is interesting though, because we put in femme. If you put in wife, épouse, I wonder if you get the same thing.
Let's have a look. Before we do that, though, a quick reminder, this was actually in Horus and Seth. On page 5, Isis changes her shape into an old lady, basically. And it uses the word here, Remichut. Interesting. I completely missed that, even though we read through this. And then again, here when Seth complains about this evil woman that just has tricked him, he also uses that word. So cool.
Well done.
What that tells me is you can read the text twice and you'll still find more things. Epus, you said.
Yeah.
Wait, it wants an accent, I believe. There we go. Interesting.
Concubine.
It only has concubine there. That's it. Although honestly, one thing I've noticed, let's see. Yeah, see that? This is not very good on Ramses Online. It has a lot of great features, but if a word is the second word in the definition, it doesn't show up. You see that? Like if you start with épouse, then it will give you épouse concubine. But if you just start with concubine, it basically thinks the word
What
doesn't exist. It's completely
what if
Yeah.
you
dumb.
check translation for the second word? Will that work, or is it
Oh,
I
good.
think it's sexual partner
no?
there.
Doesn't
I
work.
think épouse in this thing is sexual partner, brackets wife or concubine. But yes,
Maybe,
sorry,
huh?
this is relevant. I was just being, and of course, the French have their own views on these things anyway.
All right. That's a nice non sequitur.
But I don't want to rain on your parade.
Oh, I think they got enough rain on the parade yesterday, anyways. Um, for those who watched it in 3 years, it's the Olympic Games right now in Paris. So, yes, I think somebody will be watching this video in 3 years.
Nope.
Where were we? So we've talked about the first presence. Let's move a little bit further. Let's change agenda here real quick. If somebody could give me,
quickly though, before we move on,
yeah,
this now goes, instead of being in the middle of the sentence, it now goes after aku, right? Because these are nominal indirect objects.
So you're
Should probably
saying,
address.
I think I should, and I would have completely missed it, but you're right. So if you wanted to say, I give the bread to the woman, for example, it would indeed be, oops, it would indeed be direct object. And then I think the nominal dative does indeed come at the end. That's right. So en ta set, I guess like this. B1, he, like this, to the woman. Why? Because it's basically an adverbial expression. And the rule is generally adverbial expressions go at the end, with the one exception that if it is a pronominal dative, it goes as close to the verb as it can. Anybody remember how that rule works that Alan has? I love it, but I can never get it completely together. Small dogs. What was
Very
it?
small dogs often sniff other animals.
That's right.
Very small
Very
dogs.
small
Yeah.
dogs.
Subject,
Dogs.
dative, object.
And that S is little. I think it's little S, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
that makes more sense.
SOA. Yep.
Okay. So what does that stand for? Let's break that out for anybody who hasn't seen that before or doesn't quite remember. So the verb at the beginning in Middle Egyptian.
Right.
If it is a suffix pronoun, a pronominal subject indicated by a small s, that comes right after the verb. At least that is true in Middle Egyptian. A pronominal dative comes right after, and a pronominal object comes right after as well, and then comes all the rest. So the standard, let's put it this way, the standard rule in Middle Egyptian is this: verb, subject, direct object, and then any kind of a verbal expression, including datives. It's only the case that all the small pronominal things, they jump the queue. And you can basically say any pronoun will come sooner. So if you have a pronominal dative, that will basically jump across the sentence and then move ahead of all nouns. Same thing for pronominal direct objects, and of course for pronominal subjects anyways. So that's a really good point. Very small dogs often sniff other animals. Whoever came up with this.
But nominal adverbial phrases will be at the end. It's only pronominal that go into the verbal expression, right? And
Correct.
also prepositional phrases are generally at the end, right?
Correct. So
Okay.
the only pronominal adverbials that will move forwards are dative. So like if you wanted to say eros, for example, towards her, that will still go at the end, even though it is a pronoun. But the preposition en plus a suffix pronoun, that will go as close to the verb as it can. The only thing that can come before it would be a pronominal subject in an suchem F form. We'll see that in a moment. So really good call out. Cool. Could
Adopting
Do you still
this
use
to
des on the end?
go again?
Do you still put des on the end? Myself.
Des on the end?
Like reflexive or
In the ending of
Oh,
myself, I have done.
Des. When you said this, I was literally thinking, yeah, I was in a completely different country. I was thinking this year basically, but okay, I got you. You meant Jess, right?
Yeah.
Jess is pretty much close towards the end. Yes, that's right. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that can go to the end. This one, right? Jess yourself. Yeah, that definitely follows. I wonder how that would be like. I gave it myself. So, tui di aku enta zethime Jesse? Would it be all the way at the end? I think so. I think so. We just had a sentence like this the other day in one of the last sessions. It may have been the last one, honestly. Let me see.
Yeah, it was. And it was at the very end. I think I've only ever seen it at the very end.
I would agree. Yeah. Let me quickly pull it up because I remember we had this.
was it after all the other adverbs, if there are other adverbs?
I think
After everything?
so. I
Cool.
think so, honestly. Okay. Now the dual screen setup is biting me because it doesn't want to come over. Really good.
It was like, I'll give to you out of my own rations myself, something like that.
Something like that, exactly.
Yeah.
Cool. That's completely different than English. I myself will do blah blah blah.
Here we go. Her and Yui Denif. I will like share. This is a third future. I will be upon sharing, or I will be towards sharing. I will share it to you myself. So
I think it emphasizes it to put it at the end, as if you were saying my very self.
In English, you would put at the end too, right?
Well, you would.
Depends on the dialect.
Yeah. And
I'd say I myself am doing this. I'm doing this myself. I mean, it depends.
Maybe in the interest of getting more than one verb form today, we should not derail ourselves too much on stuff that isn't about the verb
Sorry.
forms.
Good point. Good point. Well, then to close out the first present, can somebody give me the other versions real quick instead of tui? So re-recording this part a bit. The proper sequence here is tui, then tuk and tu, formerly tuch and tut, but the final T has fallen off. So tu for the second feminine in the way it's pronounced and often spelled with, or normally spelled with the B1 woman. Then it's su and set for he and she, third person singular, plural tun, second plural tutin, and then finally set normally for the third person plural they. And here we have it, the tutu, which is really a thing. One. So if it were tutu, dit, nef, aku, somebody gives him bread, bread is given to him. That's the indefinite form that is very commonly used for the passive. In the in Coptic, you would replace it by se, which basically means they give, and then you just basically know that they give him bread means bread was given to him, or is given to him. Late Egyptian loves to use this tutu form, basically. It's very common. You'll see it a lot. Shouldn't trip you up. All right. So far, so good. So that's our first present. Let's change it to the past tense. How would you make it? I gave him bread. So let's change this into a past.
Do we want to start with a particle? You? Do we still have to do that?
I don't think you have to do
right?
it. Not
Yeah.
necessarily. No.
Okay. So I don't know if we want or D or just D for the verb.
I would just go with D.
D. Okay. So D E.
Mm-hmm.
And the rest is good.
The rest is good. That's absolutely right. D nav aku. So let's change this real quick here. It doesn't have a T anymore because it's now an infinitive. It's now a Sejameh form. So D could be spelled with an extra. Could be spelled with an extra W, like this, and an A1. Okay, so I gave him bread. Or it could even be without the extra here. So it could be as simple as this. Both of them are correct, I think. So yeah, this is a Sejamef. Now something I didn't do when we were talking about this form above. I should have done this. How would you have said, I give him it? I give it to him instead of aku. Replace the aku by a pronoun.
Su
No, no.
or se?
Interesting
Well,
question. Think about it's not so, it's not said.
Not
Aku,
se.
Straight after the verb.
I gave it to him.
think
No.
about it this way. What is this here grammatically? Erdit. Like
It's an infinitive.
It's an
Right,
infinitive.
I felt, right?
The nominal verb form. Yeah.
It's an infinitive. You got it. And so after infinitives, how do you put the direct object, the thing that is being worked upon? What kind of pronoun goes there?
Oh,
Suffix pronoun.
suffix pronoun.
Yep, you're both right. So basically, if I want to replace the aku, it would be F because it's masculine. So it becomes dituf. Oops.
Okay.
Dituf. Like this. Why tuf? Because it should be DTEF, but they spell out the W just to indicate that the T is really pronounced in this case. So you replace the aku by F. If it had been a feminine noun, it would of course be set. But since we had a masculine noun that we're replacing, it's the F. So this is really important because after infinitives, the direct object is a suffix pronoun. So those suffix pronouns you gave me a moment ago, that's what you would be using. whenever you're dealing with any of the verb forms that are using the infinitive. That is true for example, the first present. It's true for the negative perfect. It's true for the third future. All those verb forms that basically have something in front and the infinitive after. The direct object is a suffix pronoun glued right to the back of the infinitive. Now, this here is non-infinitive. This is a ZMF form. And in that case, what you guys said earlier, namely, you would replace this by su, is correct. You're using the whatchamacallit, the dependent pronoun, like you would in Middle Egyptian. That is still alive. So I give it to him would be di, nef, su. Yeah. So that's a big difference between the ZMF forms and the forms that use an infinitive, and something I can also trip you up quite easily when you're reading a text. You really have to remember, depending on what verb form you're dealing with, what kind of objects to expect and what not to expect. So far, so good?
Well,
Yeah.
I could ask a really basic question
Go for it.
because I'm so behind in my thinking, and others may well be in the future. Can you just run through what SEGMF means? Because you always use it as a shorthand, and I never quite know what it is.
Sure. Yeah, I'll give my take, and then maybe if anybody wants to chime in. So basically, Middle Egyptian, two major verb forms. There's the SEGMF, and then there's the SEGMNF. And basically, they do a lot of the heavy lifting to uh, mm, for a lot of the things where you want to either express that something's going on, like he hears, or may he hear, or he will hear. You use the SEGMF, and then there's the SEGMNF, which is like a past tense kind of thing, essentially. He heard. Those are like your bread and butter conjugations for Middle Egyptian. They stay this way. Well, the SEGMNF essentially dies out and gets replaced by a past SEGMF. So then you have like two SEGMF forms with different meanings. One is the progressive in Late Egyptian, the prospective in Late Egyptian, which means he will hear or may he hear. And then you have the past tense SEGMF, which essentially this verb form takes the place of the old SEGMNF and means he heard. Those are your two those are two very common verb forms, which eventually die out in demotic, and they get after demotic. They die out after demotic, and they get completely replaced by things like the first present or um, the analytical perfect. So yeah, but in Middle Egyptian, those are essentially like your most common verb forms. I'm not sure. I'm hoping I'm explaining it halfway decently. Anybody want to chime in or add more color to it?
Think
So,
they use the sejm form because that's such a common verb, and it's sort of like meaning he heard, and they just choose the a base pattern to follow for all of the
Oh,
examples. A
oh,
lot
you're
of languages do that,
yeah,
like
no,
especially
I got
Semitic languages.
I got that, but when we're talking, you like really will tend to say, "Oh, that's a SEGMF." What does
So
he
yeah,
mean?
I get that. It's used like a grammar term, even though it's
So
not.
what if you can someone else try to say for an idiot,
Well,
what do you mean when you say SEGMF? You
I,
mean
So
I
like
think of it as a sort of conjugated verb form where the subject is virtually part of the verb, and the word sejameth is the complete verb statement, as opposed to later things where you have what do you call it? You have eerie on the front. What's the word for that?
auxiliary.
Which is the way that later Egyptian has gone.
Right. Let me find a table for that.
or in contrast, what we were just doing was using an infinitive form of the verb. Sejam is a form of the verb that's conjugated with these suffix pronouns. So sejam F, he hears. Sejam E, I hear. That's, yeah, so like Chris said, it's conjugated with those suffix pronouns.
so is it the infinitive that's conjugated or just the word?
It's
The
not
infinitive is not conjugated. It's so to put the subject with the infinitive, it would be like we did before, to e, I said, to e her sejam, I hear, to e sejam, I hear.
Yeah.
So the
I think
conjugation goes.
in this form, this is not an infinitive. It's what
No,
sometimes is called the root of the verb. It's just the sound that expresses the verb. In the sejm is not in any particular form until you stick the F on the end of it.
That's
Okay,
an independent
Yeah.
that's helpful. So like
It has to do with your attaching.
the base root form. So perhaps if you compare it to Hebrew, we haven't got our Hebrew person here. It's like the core, the root. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's like the triliteral root in Hebrew. Yeah.
The one part about sejmfs that can be confusing is that they don't always have a suffix pronoun attached to them because sometimes the subject is mf, and then they're a little bit harder to spot.
That's true.
But I don't
Right,
want
like
to
the
throw too
suffix
much
takes
at
the
you.
place of the pronoun. Yeah.
So is the reason why you all find this easier to understand than me because you've done other Egyptian stuff?
I think
Okay.
so. Middle
So,
Egyptian.
okay, so
Yeah.
note to self, coming
Middle
as
Egyptian, Arabic.
a bad Coptic person, you lot take it for granted, and I never quite know what you're talking about.
Well, also like Hebrew and Akkadian do a similar thing where they choose a basic verb, a regular verb, and they use it for their grammar terms.
Yeah, no, I
Like
understand
there's
that.
there's the pa'al and stuff like that in Hebrew, and there's paras and Akkadian stuff. So.
Yeah,
I
the
mean,
word I was looking for earlier on, I think, is periphrasis.
oh, periphrastic, yeah,
Yeah,
periphrastic.
yeah,
Yes.
periphrastic forms, yeah.
As
True.
opposed to the conjugated form, it would seem just fades out in later Egyptian.
Yeah.
Instead, they use the erie and then the infinitive or the root, whichever it is, to express the verb.
Hmm.
One
I
thing
mean,
that I have a lot of trouble with, Aurelia, when you use those forms that I might be confusing for other people also, is that when you say SEJMF and then SEJMNF, I often need to really focus on if I hear that N in that term when you use it. Because apparently it makes a big difference for grammar. And for a while, I just like SEJMF, okay, SEJMNF, like, okay. I almost hear the same thing unless I know what to look for, listen for when you're saying that. So that's just something that going forward with Egyptian, I think I should be aware of because it does make a big difference. It's a different type of form. So
definitely in Middle Egyptian. You will sometimes see the Sejm NF in late Egyptian texts as well, especially if they're more literary or if they're earlier. You'll still find that instead of the past Sejm F. And thanks for the feedback there. I'll slow down a bit when I get to the verb form so that it's clearer to
no
hear
problem.
which is which. Um, in late Egyptian proper, especially like in later late Egyptian, you're not going to see much of the Sejm NF anymore because that's a classical verb form. That's pretty much in the spoken language, it's gone by the time that we're talking about. One thing I think that may help, so every time when I say it's a Sejm F or Sejm NF or something, mentally think a construction. So it's a Sejm F construction, a Bupui F, Sejm F construct, a Sejm construction, and so on. These are just different constructions that have like their shorthand labels. Maybe another thing that could help, if I can find my to Chris's point about analytical and um, and synthetic constructions. So Middle Egyptian really loves its synthetic constructions. So just like in Latin, right? Like amo, amas, amat, etc. It's really the suffixes that give you which person you're talking about. And in just like in French, it really changes to like what? Gem and to M, etc. I hope I spell that right. No, I
Oh,
think
so the prefix is at the beginning, or the pronoun is at the beginning in Romance languages, but Latin it's at the end.
and this is exactly what I hope I spelled that right. My French spelling is atrocious, and I guess that should be two here, two M. In any case, just
Whereas
like
in Latin, the person is an integral part of the verb. It's
correct,
just
Yeah.
usually the last three letters of the verb.
right, and I mean basically what happens is that
Suffix.
this is like you said, Jom F in Middle Egyptian, and then in late Egyptian you get something more like this. It's not a perfect comparison because you still have like remnants of the endings in written French, but in the spoken version, you you really only say this, right? So it's almost like you have an invariable thing at the end, and then everything else happens at the beginning. The same thing happens in Late Egyptian, basically.
That's really helpful, Aurelio. That I understand what you're saying. And that
that's a really nice comparison.
That word sejm F means it's conjugated. Is that the right word?
It's conjugated. It's a conjugated verb form, and Middle Egyptian has a few of those. Late Egyptian also has some of them left. The more you go along, the fewer of these conjugated verb forms you have, and the more you have these periphrastic constructions, where you really conjugate like the little helping verb in front, and you don't do anything to the verb proper anymore. But all the action happens in like whatever the prefix is. In Coptic, then basically everything happens in the prefixes, right? It's like af sotim, f sotim, f sotim, mpef sotim, madef sotim, etc. Everything happens at the beginning, and the sotim just sits there and doesn't do anything. In Middle Egyptian, it's very different. All the action happens on the sotim itself.
Yeah, that's a very nice comparison between Latin and Romance languages. I really like that. I mean, not just as a classics person, but I think it's cool seeing the parallels between languages completely switching where you put the pronouns in the verb. It's kind of interesting.
Happened in English too, basically. We completely gave up any, and I mean, it's practically the only vestige that's still left in English is the third person singular S. He hears. Everything else is gone. It used to be
Yeah, and we
something
just
like
rely on pronouns for context at the beginning.
correct. I mean, it used to be like
is he hears, that's conjugated.
say that again.
Is
Sorry.
he hears conjugated?
In English, yes, it is. I mean, the S at the end of here is still conjugated. It used
It's a remnant of the suffix pronoun in Old English or maybe Middle English. I'm not sure.
Okay, thanks. I'm not very good at grammar. Guess what I studied at university? English literature and language.
Okay. Yeah,
Well,
I mean,
you really are good at it. You're trying to kid us.
Yeah, you're doing great.
I think so too.
This is really hard. I struggle with verb forms in Egyptian constantly. I mean,
Me too.
Mhm.
how many times, Elio, have you asked me what form of verb was? And I just go, I don't know. It's really hard. We're making it
is, especially because they're so similar looking. Like some of them have like Sejm F, Sejm NF. It's like, okay, sure. They almost sound identical if you don't emphasize that N. So
well, and so many times you just see a naked verb, you know, even when it is a Sejm F, you'll just see a verb and then figure it out.
Right.
Yeah, or the pronouns get replaced by an actual noun, and it's like, okay, but where's my nice conjugation go?
Right.
One last question.
Sure.
So I've written down Sejm F, he hears, Sejm NF, he heard.
That is Middle Egyptian, though.
Okay, but what is does the NF, does the N mean past tense?
It is used for something, it's more like a spectral thing. So something that is completed. It's not exactly a tense in Middle Egyptian because Middle Egyptian is more of an aspect-based language. Like, yeah, I think it's the best I can say.
Got to go. Thank you. I'm so sorry.
No, this is good. I thought honestly that's why we should have this kind of recap session, which brings up the question, what do we want to do next time? Do we just go back to the regular program, or do we do one more just to cover the mountain of verb forms and construction we've already seen?
I think we should definitely do more of this.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I mean, look at what we've done. You know, obviously we have a lot of questions and a lot of stuff to dig into.
Awesome. I mean, I'm definitely game. I also learn in these, so then we just do another one of those next time. And I'll just basically continue throwing out simple sentences there and we play with them. Okay? All righty. Good. Then, yes, see you all next week for Horace and Seth, and hopefully, and otherwise in 2 weeks for the next of these recap sessions.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Super helpful. Good weekend. Bye-bye.